If you miss this shot, you don't get to fire again. The words hit the firing line harder than any recoil. At 300 yards, the steel plate waited. No correction, no second chance. The first shot missed. And 6 elite sniper trainees realized, too late, that today wasn't about accuracy. It was about finality. Lieutenant Owen Hale lowered his rifle slowly, jaw clenched tight with restrained fury. 53 rounds had already been fired that morning. Every miss felt louder than the last. "This isn't possible," he muttered. Today was supposed to be simple. A cold barrel. One clean hit. The gate into Special Operations Sniper designation. Instead, it was becoming a public unraveling. At the edge of the range, behind the safety barrier, a woman in a faded gray support uniform stood beside a rack of unused target frames. Her badge read simply, A. Locke, Range Safety Support. No rank, no unit patch. Just another shadow in the background. She had watched every failed shot without expression. Hale reset his scope with sharp, angry movements. Again. The trainee beside him, Corporal Cooper Maddox, swallowed hard and chambered another round. His breathing was shallow now, not from recoil, from pressure. Cold barrel shots were supposed to be sacred. One chance. You either had it, or you didn't belong here. Maddox fired. Miss. The sound of impact never came. Silence spread across the firing line. Someone quietly cursed under their breath. Hale ripped off his ear protection. "These computers can calculate artillery strikes across continents, and we can't hit a stationary target?" From behind them, Avery Locke spoke. Not loudly, not sharply, just enough to slice through the air. "You're planning to fail." Every head turned at once. Hale stared at her. "What did you say?" "You're treating the first shot like it's disposable," Avery said. "Like you expect a second one." A few of the trainees scoffed. "This range runs on data, not superstition," Hale snapped. "We correct with precision." Avery tilted her head slightly. "Correction means you already accepted being wrong." That landed. Maddox felt it. So did the others. Hale stepped closer to the barrier. He was taller, louder, decorated. "You don't understand combat pressure." For the first time, Avery's calm shifted. Not into anger, into something colder. "Then you've mistaken me." The mountain air tightened. "We don't fight like it's 1951 anymore," Hale said. Avery answered without hesitation. "Neither do your enemies." No one laughed this time. Something about the way she stood, still, centered, perfectly balanced, didn't match the uniform on her back. Hale studied her, really studied her. No shaking hands, no wandering eyes. Only the shooters. "Who trained you?" Avery didn't answer with a name. She walked forward instead. Past the line, past the rifles loaded with digital brains. She stopped at the last unused rack and lifted out a rifle none of them had touched. Old wood, worn steel. An action polished smooth by decades of repetition. She set it on the bench and placed one single round beside it. "One shot," she said. Hale laughed sharply. "With that? Yes. You'll miss. Then you'll never hear my voice again. And if you hit..." Avery slid the round into the chamber with a soft, metallic click. "Then you stop teaching your shooters that failure is reversible." The range went silent. Maddox felt his hands tremble, not from fear of the shot, from the weight inside her voice. Hale folded his arms. "Fine, prove it." Avery didn't adjust the optic, didn't touch the dials, didn't request wind data. She lowered herself behind the rifle with slow, deliberate precision. The old posture, the kind drilled into soldiers who never expected a second trigger pull. Across the valley, the steel waited at 300 yards, cold, unforgiving. Avery exhaled once, settled and squeezed. The steel struck once, not a glancing ring, not a delayed echo, a full, violent impact that tore across the mountain valley and came back like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The scope cameras replayed it in clinical silence. Dead center. No correction, no warm-up. One cold barrel shot. Hale didn't breathe. Maddox didn't blink. The range that had devoured 53 rounds without mercy had just been conquered by a single, irreversible decision. Avery worked the bolt, ejected the casing, and set the rifle back on the bench as if she had just completed an ordinary safety check. "That wasn't luck," Hale said quietly. "No," she replied. "It was discipline." The trainees looked at their rifles as if seeing them for the first time. Not as tools, as crutches. Hale turned to the team. "Reset, we run again." Maddox stepped forward first, hands stiff at his sides. "Sir, the computers say we should still correct." Avery faced him before Hale could answer. "Correction is a luxury of survival without consequence." Maddox hesitated. "And what happens when you're wrong?" Avery met his eyes. "Then people die." Silence fell heavy again. "You think we don't know that?" Hale snapped. "I think you've trained for success," Avery said, "not for finality." She walked slowly along the firing line, eyes tracing each shooter's posture, breathing rhythm, trigger finger tension. "You're all excellent marksmen, but none of you are behaving like someone who only ever gets one chance." Hale crossed his arms. "You're describing a battlefield that barely exists anymore." Avery stopped in front of Maddox. "Tell me something, Corporal. When did you last fire a shot without expecting feedback?" Maddox opened his mouth, then closed it. Avery nodded. "Exactly." She turned back toward Hale. "Your shooters are conditioned to adjust, not to decide." Hale exhaled slowly. His instincts rejected her, but the steel couldn't. "You keep talking about this doctrine," he said. "What exactly do you think you know?" Avery considered him for a long moment. Then, quietly, she answered. "There was a generation of marksmen trained to survive without confirmation, without correction, without witnesses. They didn't shoot to measure. They shot because the shot itself ended the problem." Maddox felt the words land like weight in his chest. "First Shot Doctrine," Avery continued. "Cold barrel rule, no confirmation fire. You weren't allowed to stay long enough to see if you were right." Hale frowned. "Because of counter battery. And because sometimes," Avery said, "the only proof you get that you were correct is that you're still breathing." The trainees exchanged uneasy looks. Hale glanced at the untouched rack of modern rifles. "That doctrine died for a reason." "It was buried," Avery corrected. "Not killed." She turned back to the firing line. "You want to know why you missed?" She tapped the bench beside Maddox's rifle. "You pulled the trigger hoping for correction." She tapped her own chest. "I pulled it expecting consequence." Hale stared at the steel target again. "You're saying mindset beat math?" "No," Avery replied. "I'm saying fear shapes precision." That unsettled him more than the shot itself. Hale exhaled. "All right, you've made your point." Avery didn't smile. "No," she said. "I've only exposed the problem." Maddox swallowed. "Then what's the fix?" Avery stepped back into the safety zone. "You strip them." Hale turned sharply. "Strip what?" "The machines," she said. "For one run." The protest came instantly. "That's reckless. That breaks protocol. That violates safety doctrine." Avery answered calmly. "So did teaching shooters that mistakes are recoverable." The line went silent again. Hale paced for a few seconds. The familiar instinct to maintain control warred against the reality burning into his retinas. Finally, he said quietly, "One shooter." He looked at Maddox. "You." Maddox's heart slammed against his ribs. "With what?" Avery lifted the old rifle from the bench and held it out. Maddox hesitated before taking it. Without the digital weight of processors and screens, it felt naked in his hands. No safety net. Avery leaned close enough that only he could hear her. "You don't fire until you've already accepted the outcome," she said. Maddox nodded. His breathing slowed. He no longer looked at the steel. He looked at the space between himself and failure. Across the range, Hale raised his hand. "Cold barrel," Hale announced. Maddox exhaled once and fired. The shot from Maddox's rifle cracked across the range. No echo came back, no ring, just empty air. The steel target still stood. Miss. Maddox didn't lower the rifle. He stayed, locked in place, cheek welded to the stock, eyes frozen in the optic as if he could force reality to reverse itself. Behind him, no one spoke. Not Hale, not the instructors, not Avery. 54th miss of the day. Maddox finally worked the bolt with a shaking hand. The spent casing ejected and fell onto the concrete with a sound loud enough to feel humiliating. "I failed," he whispered. Avery stepped beside him, not angry, not disappointed, certain. "No," she said. "You hesitated." Maddox turned toward her, eyes glassy. "I accepted the outcome like you said." Avery shook her head once. "You accepted the possibility, not the consequence." Hale broke the silence. "That's splitting hairs." Avery turned on him slowly. "No, that's the entire difference between a decision and a guess." She faced Maddox again. "You fired hoping to survive the mistake. That's not what this is." Maddox swallowed. "Then what is it?" Avery's voice dropped. "This is deciding before you breathe that the world ends the moment your finger moves." No one liked the way that sounded. Hale rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. "Enough philosophy." The man missed. Avery looked back at him. "Because he still believes he gets another run." Maddox stiffened. "I don't." Avery's eyes didn't soften. "You did the moment you stood up." That cut deeper than any reprimand. Hale exhaled slowly. "You've proven a point. The doctrine is extreme. Now we return to functional training." Avery didn't move. "You invited consequence onto your range," she said. "You don't get to shut it off when it becomes uncomfortable." Hale stepped forward. "This is still my range." Avery's answer was calm. "Then own what you just taught him." Hale paused, turned back to Maddox. "Walk me through your process." Maddox swallowed. "I stabilized, controlled my breathing, trusted the sight picture." Avery interjected. "When did you decide?" Maddox hesitated. "That pause," she said quietly. "That's where the miss lived." Maddox looked down at his hands. They were still trembling. Avery picked up the old rifle from the bench and set it back in front of him. Again, Maddox's eyes widened. "I already used the cold barrel." Avery nodded. "Exactly." Hale stiffened. "That violates the entire principle." "No," Avery replied. "It reveals whether he believes in it." The range went silent again. Hale stared at Maddox. "Your call, Corporal." Maddox looked at the steel target, then at the rifle, then at Avery. "If I miss again," Avery finished for him, "then you'll finally understand what the first miss meant." Maddox slid back into position. His breathing was off. Too deep, too fast. Avery crouched beside him. "You're still bargaining with the future." "I'm just trying not to fail again," he whispered. Avery's voice was low. "That's exactly why. You will." Across the range, Hale raised his hand again. "Cold barrel is gone," he announced. "This is voluntary correction." Maddox closed his eyes. "On the first estimate. On the second." "No." He forced himself to stop counting. He let the idea of a second chance die in his chest. When he opened his eyes again, they were clear. He fired. The sound of steel came back instantly. Clean, violent, unmistakable. The target rang. A murmur ran down the firing line. Shock colliding with relief. Maddox gasped as if he had been underwater. Avery stood slowly. "That's not a corrected shot." Hale stared through binoculars. "That was a center hit." "It was a decided one," she said. Maddox lowered the rifle, breath shaking, face pale. "I didn't think about fixing it." Avery nodded. "Good." Hale turned his gaze back to Avery. "That doesn't make your doctrine superior." "No," she agreed. "It makes your current one incomplete." Hale looked at his shooters. 6 men trained by the best machines money could buy. All of them now watching one rifle, and one woman like their world had shifted a few degrees off its axis. "You're trying to break us," Hale said quietly. Avery's gaze didn't waver. Combat already will. Hale hesitated. Then he made a decision that none of the instructors expected. All shooters, he said. Strip your systems. The protests came instantly. This is insane. That violates training safety margins. We're not equipped for that. Hale raised his voice. You're equipped with yourselves. If that's not enough, you shouldn't be here. Reluctantly, one by one, ballistic computers were removed. Wind tools were shut off. Data screens went dark. The range felt suddenly primitive. Avery walked the line slowly as the shooters reset. No measurements, no correction tables, no digital reassurance. You feel naked, she said. That's honesty. Maddox settled in again for his next official qualification shot. No digital aid, no correction, just one chance. Hale stared at him through binoculars. Fire when ready. Maddox inhaled and froze. His finger hovered on the trigger. The old fear returned, thick and suffocating. Avery's voice came quietly from behind him. If you need permission to fail, don't fire. The words hit him like a slap. Maddox fired. Miss! The steel remained silent. Maddox closed his eyes. This time, he didn't speak. He didn't apologize. He simply nodded once. I wasn't ready, he said. Avery answered, Now you're being truthful. That forced a greater silence than any hit. Hale lowered the binoculars. This isn't marksmanship training anymore, he said. This is psychological exposure. Avery looked at him. It always was. You just used electronics to pretend otherwise. Hale studied his shooters. One had hit under pressure. One had missed under honesty. Neither result let them hide anymore. Hale drew a slow breath. You've started something you may not get to finish. Avery nodded. That's how most necessary things begin. The miss wasn't the shock. It was Maddox's reaction to it. He didn't flinch, didn't curse, didn't apologize. He simply breathed out like he had been expecting the failure. Avery watched him carefully. Now, she said, you're dangerous. Hale turned sharply. Excuse me? When a shooter stops fearing the truth, Avery said, they stop hiding behind excuses. Maddox lowered the rifle and stood, calmer than he'd been all morning. It unsettled the others. Confidence after failure wasn't something they saw often. Certainly not in training this brutal. Hale stepped forward, frustration simmering. We're supposed to hit, not philosophize. Avery faced him. And yet none of your shooters hit until they learned why they miss. The word struck deeper than Hale wanted to admit. He looked at his team, 6 men, each carrying $20,000 rifles, $6,000 optics, digital tools built to eliminate uncertainty. And they were rattled. Stripped, exposed. Avery walked the line again, slow and deliberate. You're all relying on data to make decisions for you, she said. You're trained to solve problems. But combat doesn't reward problem solvers, it rewards decisiveness. She stopped in front of Sergeant Nolan Briggs, the oldest trainee, built like he had crawled out of a storm. You, she said, shoot next. Briggs nodded, stepped forward, and took Maddox's position. Unlike the younger shooters, Briggs had muscle memory carved from real deployments. Kandahar, Fallujah, Marja. Places where hesitation burned hotter than fear. He settled behind the old rifle. No breathing apps, no wind values, no electronic checklist humming in his ear. Just him and a target far enough away that a heartbeat could move the reticle off steel. Hale raised his hand. Shooter ready? Briggs braced. Fire when... A sudden clatter broke the moment. Private Renner, one of the newer trainees, backed away from his rifle, eyes wide, hands trembling so hard the sling rattled against the stock. I can't, he said. Hale froze. What? Renner's breathing hitched. Not without correction, not without confirmation. I can't do this blind. Avery looked at him with something colder than disappointment. Then step off my line, she said. Hale stepped between them. Locke, he's a trainee, not a liability. No, Avery replied. He proved he is. Renner shook his head violently. I'm not weak. I just need the tools. Avery cut him off. Your enemy won't hand you tools, Private. Renner's face flushed with humiliation. The others avoided looking at him, not out of cruelty, but out of recognition. That fear lived somewhere inside all of them. Hale spoke quietly. Renner, step back and breathe. But Avery didn't move. He shouldn't step back. He should leave. Renner stiffened. You don't get to decide that. Avery's eyes didn't soften. A shooter who needs certainty will never fire the shot that matters. Hale clenched his jaw. Locke, enough. Avery turned toward him. You want your unit to survive deployment? Then stop protecting their confidence. Protect their readiness. Hale stared at her. She wasn't challenging his authority. She was dismantling it. Finally, he looked at Renner. Private, wait by the truck. Renner's face collapsed, but he obeyed. Briggs had watched everything. He settled behind the rifle again, jaw firm, eyes narrowed. Hale raised his hand once more. Shooter! Briggs fired before Hale finished speaking. The steel rang so hard the echo shook dust off the rafters. No hesitation, no correction, no fear. Avery exhaled, almost imperceptibly. That, she said, is someone who's fought a consequence before. Briggs stood, silent, stoic. Hale stared at his team. Fractures widening, breakthroughs happening beside breakdowns, readiness bleeding into vulnerability. Locke, Hale finally said. What's happening to them? Avery looked at the shooters. Some steadier, some shaking, all stripped bare. Nothing new, she said. You're just seeing who they really are. By sunset, the mountain had gone quiet, not because the training had ended, but because something irreversible had been decided. 5 shooters remained on the line. 1 had walked away. 1 had broken through. 1 had learned the cost of hesitation, and all of them now understood something they hadn't that morning. They were no longer training to be accurate. They were training to be final. Lieutenant Hale stood alone beside the faded bench where the old rifle still rested. Avery Locke was already packing the last of the range equipment into storage crates, moving with the same calm precision she had shown since the first failed shot. Hale watched her for a long moment. You dismantled my system in one day, he said. Avery didn't look up. No, your system dismantled itself. I only stopped it from lying. Hale exhaled. Renner's file is already flagged. He'll be reassigned. Maybe permanently. Avery paused. Then today spared him, she said, from becoming a name that ends with silence. Hale didn't respond. Across the range, Maddox sat alone on the gravel beside his rifle, turning the spent casing from his hit over in his fingers like a coin from another life. That single round had changed the way his hands moved and the way his fear behaved. Briggs approached Avery quietly. You were right, he said. She didn't ask about what. Fear never left, Briggs continued. It just stopped owning my hands. Avery nodded once. Then carry that with you. Hale stepped closer. You never told us where you learned this. Avery met his eyes. I learned it because men died while waiting for confirmation. Hale lowered his gaze. You're not staying, he said. Avery shook her head. Doctrine doesn't stay. It moves. She picked up the old rifle for the last time and placed it back on the rack where it belonged. Your shooters will never fire the same way again. Hale looked out over the range. He realized she was right. That night, the training logs were rewritten. Ballistic dependency was downgraded. Cold barrel discipline was restored. Psychological finality was added to the core sniper qualification standard. And written at the very top of the new doctrine board, in chalk, none of them erased. The first shot is never a test. Weeks later, the Shadowlance unit deployed. On a ridgeline no map would ever name, Maddox lay prone in the dark with 1 round chambered and 5 lives waiting behind him. No digital readout, no confirmation, no correction coming, only decision. He heard Avery's voice in his memory. Not loud, not heroic, just precise. If you need permission to fail, don't fire. Maddox didn't hesitate this time. He decided. The mission continued because of that decision. Liv's did too. Back at Black Ridge, the old rifle stayed on its hook. No plaque, no record. Just a quiet reminder that once, on that mountain, certainty lost to discipline. And somewhere beyond the range, Avery Locke was already gone, leaving no trail but the way hands now steadied before pulling a trigger. And now, let me speak to you directly. Because this story was never really about rifles. It was about the moment before action, when hesitation tries to disguise itself as caution, when fear pretends to be preparation, when we wait for one more confirmation before we decide who we are. Most of life doesn't give us correction rounds. Most of the choices that shape us only come once. So the question isn't whether you'll be ready. The question is whether you'll decide. Because when the moment arrives, there is no second trigger pull on who you become.